So, good evening. Welcome to another industry talk Rhein-Neckar of the German Physical Society. The topic today is federated learning, a privacy-preserving machine learning technique to advance medical research. Our speakers today are Philippe Mann, Camille Marini, and Mathieu Andreu. The talk today is a joint event of the Working Group on Industry and Business and the Working Group on Physics, Modern Information Technology, and Artificial Intelligence. I will guide you through the evening and Philippe Mann as moderators. We are from the organization team Rhein-Neckar. Before I introduce the speakers, a few organizational notes. After the presentation, which will last about 1 hour, a question and answer session of 30 minutes is planned. So ask the presentation related questions in the Q&A section. You should see something in the Zoom below, and the technical and organizational questions directly in the chat. Philippe Mann, Oakwin Senior Partnership Manager, graduated in physics and did his PhD at the German Cancer Research Center in Heidelberg. He continued to work as a postdoc in the field of MR-guided radiotherapy, being responsible for national and international research projects. He is now the partnership manager in Germany and responsible for managing and creating new partnerships with academic centers. Camille Marini completed her PhD in data science in physical oceanography at Université Pierre et Marie Curie. And prior to joining Oakwin, Camille was an academic researcher and worked at startups focused on the reproducible and traceable AI. She now serves as Oakwin's Chief Technology Officer. Mathieu Andreu, the head of federated machine learning, graduated at the École Polytechnique in ENS Paris. Mathieu completed his training with a PhD in deep learning and signal processing. Mathieu is now a senior data scientist at Oakwin, where he leads a group conducting applied research on and driving applications on federated research. So now it's your turn, Philippe.
So thank you very much, Andreas, for this nice introduction. So basically, I will start to give you a short introduction on who we are and what we do before I will hand over to my two colleagues, Camille and Mathieu. So the basic idea of Oakwin is the following. As you might know, there's a lot of patient data out there which can be used for development of AI models. However, the model itself is only as good as the data heterogeneity, and therefore to create robust and well-performing AI models in clinical routine, you require multiple centers that should be included in developing such models. So by keeping in mind data privacy, data governance, and current GDPR regulations, we at Oakwin developed a federated learning infrastructure to let those models be trained on various data sets without centralizing the data. So the data basically never leaves the institution. So as a short background from Oakwin, it was founded in 2016 by a medical doctor and a machine learning expert. And it's currently located in US, France, UK, and since already 7 months, I think, also in Germany and in Switzerland with approximately plus 100 employees. We raised about $70 million from venture capital firms such as Google Ventures, Fidelity, and F-Prime. And the key challenges we are trying to address is basically that the Oakwin platform connects top-tier academic medical centers with privacy-preserving learning technologies. And the platform we're using for this, it's Oakwin Connect for the federated learning infrastructure, basically the data alliance team that connects the different hospitals and the KOL community to guide the data access. And then on top of this, the AI engines that are basically focusing on the field of pharmaceutical companies to better understand why patient outcome varies from patient to patient, and also create models on deciding which drug is best suited for which patient. So the next slide. Why working together with Okin? So we have a large access on various data sets, basically on cardiovascular disease and in oncology. We have a huge federated learning infrastructure with approximately 70 models and 30 engineers. We have a large network of key opinion leaders in the field with large consortium, and we work with the best academic centers in Europe together. So that was for me as a short introduction, and now I will give the microphone to my colleagues.
Thanks a lot. Hello, everybody. So I will now make a short introduction to federated learning and the research landscape around this technology. So before we start with federated learning, let me first introduce what machine learning is if you're not familiar with this approach. So in machine learning, the goal is to automate tasks. These tasks can be very varied. It can be, for instance, image classification. You want to know, you want the computer to recognize if in an image contains, for instance, a dog or a cat. It can be something more applied to medical imaging. Say you have a microscopic image of tissue and you want to segment exactly the position of the tumor within this slide. Can be something more physics applied. Say you have a tokamak with some plasma running inside it, and you want to predict if there will be some kind of unstable mode growth, which can cause damages. And the issue is that you need to react very quickly, and machine learning can be used to forecast this kind of instabilities in real time. Another application of machine learning could be, for instance, drug-protein affinity prediction, with a good suitable representation of a drug, another of a protein, and to predict if they are going to bond together or not. So there are many ways to tackle these problems in terms of computer science, but machine learning looks at a data-driven approach. So typically the problem is formulated as a supervised problem where we have some inputs, say here in this case the images, and nature has given us some outputs, say the label, saying if the image is a cat or a dog. And the goal of machine learning is to build a parameterized model f theta, who is going to take as input the same inputs as nature and output something which is as close as possible to the true real value. And this is often done by training on some data so as to minimize the prediction error on training data. So the goal then is to minimize some loss function of the parameter theta, which is as an average of the prediction error of the model. And for instance, this error could be some mean square error of the prediction and the target in the case of regression. And typically, this is solved by gradient descent approaches or methods which are close to this. So this is very generic, and in particular, the model is not really specified, it just has some parameters. But among all classes of machine learning models, there is one class which has been very successful over the last years, which is deep learning, which is also known as neural networks, which has been really successful for all data which has some structure, in particular signal processing structure, such as audio, images, and volumetric data, but also for language processing and other kinds of applications. So how do we do machine learning in practice? Machine learning requires two things. The first one is large data sets to ensure a proper generalization of the model. By that, I mean that the goal is not to predict only well on training data, but to generalize to unseen data. And in particular, for deep learning models, one needs very large data sets. This ImageNet dataset is quite famous in the machine learning field because it was one of the largest datasets which was released publicly, and it was thanks to this dataset that progressed in deep learning image, in fact. And because machine learning and deep learning models have a lot of parameters and need to train on a lot of data, one needs some computation power to train. This graph on the right shows that for natural language processing models, the number of parameters in state-of-the-art models is growing very quickly over time. So the workflow given these constraints is typically the following. Data is pooled in a central repository across multiple sources so as to reach a critical size and really to have a very large data set to train a good machine learning model. And then training is done in large computing facilities, typically some kind of supercomputers with a lot of graphical processing units and CPUs and optimized memory and other optimizations. So this is great, and it has led to a lot of progress in not only the seminal fields of image recognition, but a lot of different applications. But this story relies on the assumption that one can pull data in a central repository or in a data center. But this is not always the case. There are different data sharing obstacles. The first one is the existence of data regulations. Because around the world, a lot of data regulations are coming into place to protect privacy. Transfers between world regions are increasingly monitored. Also because we are, in particular at Owkin, we're looking at very sensitive data for which there exist healthcare-specific regulations because they can, leaking this kind of data could harm the persons that are related to. And in fact, there is an increased public awareness and sensitivity on these privacy issues. So this is the first obstacle to data sharing, but it's not the only one. Another obstacle is that data is also a valuable asset. In the case of academics, at Owkin we work a lot with hospitals, there can be some kind of competition between the principal investigators who have spent years and decades building a very nice curated data set of patients, and they do not want to disclose this data set to their competitors because it's this data set which has allowed them to publish in top-tier journals. Similarly, for private companies, the data sets they hold contains a lot of valuable intellectual property because it may contain the results of costly experiments. Also, it can reveal some confidential information on the activities they are undergoing, and they may not want to share it to their competitors who are doing the same business. So even if data sharing would be beneficial for the whole system, because we would end up with larger data sets, building better machine learning models, individual actors may not have interest in sharing their data. This setting is mostly known as competitive setting. Another data sharing obstacle, in some cases, can simply be data transfer. In the case of autonomous vehicles, for instance, these machines have a lot of sensors, and it's estimated they generate about 10 gigabytes per second. And so it's impossible to upload everything, every single data point they see to the central server. So this leads to a potential waste because some events may be discarded and not feed the new machine learning model. Also, simply transferring data can be complex because in terms of contracting, it can be an issue as well. And so data sharing is not always easy, and it's an issue because then data remains in silos across the different institutions who hold data. And some actors may have few data, and it's really painful, but some of them can have a lot of data. And they may think it's okay, I have enough data, I can train a good machine learning model. But this can also lead to a lack of diversity and representativity in the data they hold because it comes from this particular center, from this environment. And this may hurt generalization. Also, it can create statistical biases in the final machine learning model. In some cases, also, no single center holds enough data, for instance, in the case of rare diseases. And so in this case, if we cannot share data, we are completely cornered. And this is where federated learning comes in. Federated learning is here to solve the data sharing bottleneck. The main idea is the following. We start with a network of centers which are willing to collaborate. Data will never leave the centers. However, we will endow each center with computing power for local training. And so each center is capable of training a machine learning model on its set. And then instead of sharing data, is gonna exchange machine learning models between centers throughout training. So machine learning models, or more generally quantities related to this model, are gonna transit between the different centers. So at the end of training, each center will end up with a model which has been indirectly trained on data coming from all the centers. And this leads to a kind of best of both worlds situation, where each center keeps data control and ownership, but they do collaborate together for machine learning training as if data had been pulled in a central setting. So this is really the main idea. Now I'm going to present some toy example in order to root it a bit more. So we assume we have 3 centers, and we have a central server, which is a trusted party to handle all the communication. So the central server is going to have the current version of the machine learning model. It's going to first send it to the different centers. Then these centers are going to fit this previous value on their local data. And because they have different data, potentially, this may lead to different local models. And then these models are going to be sent back to the central server, who is going to aggregate them, and simply by averaging the weight value, for instance. And this will yield a new consensus value of the model, which can be then sent back to the centers to iterate the same steps until there is some kind of convergence. So I've presented the generality and some toy example. Now I'm gonna give a bit more of an overview of the different flavors of federated learning which exist. So I must point out that there are many variations. For instance, what I've presented before was a centralized setting with a trusted central server, but you can also imagine some kind of decentralized communication between all the different nodes. Similarly, the scheme that I presented was synchronous, but it's possible to imagine some kind of asynchronous scheme. Also, you may not need to average the model itself, but in fact, model updates like deltas between the previous value and the new value. Also, in particular, in the case of deep learning, you may not want to share the entire model because there is this notion of layer. You can only share some parts of layers which are relevant to the joint training. And because each center may only be interested in increasing its own local performance, you can imagine some kind of personalization where there will be some collaboration, but still each center will end up with a different model. Among the different settings which are considered in industrial applications, there is this cross-device federated learning. Cross-device corresponds to the edge setting, where you have millions of very small devices, for instance, smartphones. Because there are millions of them and they are typically used by the users, they are not always available simultaneously for training. They can only be used when the smartphone is charging on Wi-Fi and not being used. A characteristic of this setting is that devices typically have a low bandwidth, and also that local datasets are relatively small compared to the millions of data which are amassed throughout the federated learning network. So this is a setting which is typically considered by web actors and tech giants. Another setting is a cross-silo federated learning, where there are much fewer participants, from 2 to 10 or 100. And in this setting, all participants can take part in all rounds, and they typically have a good bandwidth. Also, they have a larger data set compared to, they can already typically train a machine learning model, and so it can be, so it's slightly different from this setting. And this setting is typically the one which is considered by Hawking in the activities. So I've presented you the main paradigm, an example, and some flavors and settings. Now I'm going to show you some research questions in the community. The first challenge is privacy. Because yes, thanks to federated learning, data never leaves centers. However, there are still some quantities which are exchanged between centers. There are the model updates during training, and also the final model weights, which can be disclosed to the training participants and also potentially to other parties. And these quantities may indirectly leak information on the data they have seen. And this is particularly important in a case where you do not trust the other parties in the coopetitive framework I mentioned before. So this raises two questions. First, how do we quantify information leakage through these quantities? And then, how do we provably protect against such a leakage? So in federated learning, there are typically two kinds of answers which are used for this question. During training, one can typically use secure aggregation. It's a cryptographic method which allows to encrypt the individual updates which are sent by each center, such that only the aggregate, the sum, can be deciphered both by the server and the different centers. And this is great because then any party having access to the aggregate cannot really know, cannot really attribute to which centers the information comes from. So this already provides some protection. In order to protect not only the updates, but also the final model, a good framework to think the problem is differential privacy. Differential privacy provides a measure of the information leakage on each individual record, in fact. It provides a measure, and also it can be used to define some protocols in order to be differentially private. A standard protocol that can be used simply amounts to adding noise during training on each center before the aggregation. But then if you add really Gaussian noise to your weights, this can lead to some performance drop. And so there is this trade-off between performance and privacy. And this highlights the fact that it's important to tightly quantify information leakage, because if you do not measure well, you're going to have a bad trade-off. Another challenge that we face is communication efficiency. In federated learning, there is local training, which is a computation step, and then there is some communication step with, in this case, a central server. And in some settings, communication can be the bottleneck because there is a low bandwidth, or because there is a large model size proportionally to the bandwidth. So this raises two questions. What's the the best way to communicate, and how do we achieve it for a particular deep learning model? An approach which is favored in federated learning is to sparsify. First, to sparsify temporally the updates, but by reducing the communication frequency between the different centers. Then another way is to sparsify the weights which are sent. So you can compress them. And as you can see on this graph coming from work of Sattler and co-authors, you can really, this is the error, so smaller is better, and this is the amount of bits which are being transferred throughout training. And what you can see is that you can achieve a similar error with orders of magnitude fewer bits which are being transferred. Another challenge revolves more around the kind of machine learning models that one uses. Federated learning as an optimization problem is typically written as a minimization of a loss function, which reads as a sum of individual loss functions, LK, and K is the number of centers, and the LK is simply the empirical risk for the center K that I wrote in one of my first slides, where this is the sum of the local errors for the center K. This is all nice, but there are two hidden assumptions. The first is that the problem reads as a sum across individual samples and across centers. We call this assumption separability. Another assumption is that the parameters theta belong to a vector space, and this allows one to use gradient methods, and in particular, a notion of averaging of weights. In fact, it's not always the case that this assumption holds. In the case of, even in the case of deep learning. Regarding the separability assumption, there is this very famous batch normalization layer in deep learning, which is very often used in order to increase performance. But batch normalization is not separable. So how does it fit into a federated learning framework? Similarly, for biomedical analysis, the Cox proportional hazard model is very often used. but its loss function is not separable. In the case of the vector space assumption, it holds for deep learning models, but it typically does not hold for models which are trees, because it doesn't really make sense to average two trees. At least it's not really obvious. And these are kinds of open questions regarding the machine learning models that can be trained in a federated fashion. A last class of problems revolves around heterogeneity, meaning the fact that data does not come from the same distributions in all centers. These are examples of microscopic images of cancer tissue taken in 3 different centers in the Netherlands. And as you can see, the colors are slightly different. And of course, you can really see it if you look, if you plot the histograms of the images, you really see a difference in the distribution of the data. And it's not only around the image color distribution. There can be also variations in demographics, in the methods and machines which were used to prepare data, and also in the way that data was collected, because it may have been collected for some purpose and then repurposed, and so on and so forth. And this is an issue because it can slow down training in order to take into account these differences in distribution. One may need to communicate more, and if communication is a bottleneck, it slows down training. And also it can create a lot of statistical biases. If the distribution are different, the machine learning model can try to associate, for instance, the color to a feature, whereas it doesn't play any role. So there are 2 questions, which are very general. The first one is, how do we formulate heterogeneity? Because heterogeneity is like non-identical distribution. It's a negative definition, which is not really workable. How do we, it's an open question, what is a good formalization? And then how do we automatically detect and adjust to some kind of refined heterogeneity definition when it's present? And in fact, there are many other changes. Because federated learning is not a field per se, it's more the aggregation of different technologies, of different bricks, which each of them have their own changes, but there are a lot of changes which are being created simply by their interactions. And it creates a lot of very nice open questions. And in fact, it's federated learning is a very fertile domain. If you look in Google Scholar, the amount of works which are being published, you see that it grows exponentially through time. So this concludes my presentation. I will now leave the floor to Camille Marini, who will now present the changes and federated learning applications to healthcare.
Okay, so I think you can all see my screen now. And so I'm gonna, now that we've seen some important theoretical aspect of federated learning, I'm gonna explain some applications that we have at Hawkin, and also the technology that we've built to deal with these applications, along with the requirements that we face for using federated learning. So as Mathieu mentioned, at Hawkin, the type of federated learning corresponds to cross-silo federated learning, meaning that there are few centers and more data per center. And so I'm going to show the application, but I'm sure that there are key learnings for you, even if you're not in the healthcare domain. Okay, so let's start with the requirements. So there are different types of requirements when you want to do a federated learning project. So first, you need to consider different persona, different roles, so different types of people who are going to intervene in the journey of using federated learning. Either during the setup of the platform for federated learning, or also when running the platform, so when using the platform itself. So the first type of user of role corresponds to data admin. So they want to protect the data. So as Mathieu mentioned, so federated learning can be very interesting if you deal with sensitive data. So either because it's personal data or because it's competitive data. and in particular in healthcare. So we deal with sensitive data, so both personal and competitive. And so we have to deal with data admin. So they want to protect the data, and they want also to valorize the data. So to make profit out of it, because it costs money for them to acquire the data. And during the run of the platform, so when really using, so after that the project has been set up and that the technology has been deployed, so when really we use federated learning, what they want to do is to monitor computation and data access. They want to make sure that the data are used for what they agreed on and not for something else. Second type of user correspond to to IT admin. So on their side, they want to make sure that there is no security breach, and also so they are involved in setting up the infrastructure requirements. So everything related to security policies and etc. And when running the platform, they want to monitor the infrastructure, so make sure that there is no new vulnerability and that everything is going fine. Third type of users are field experts. So those are the ones who know the data. So they know what the data could be used for, and they want, I mean, if they want to use federated learning, it's because they want to leverage data from multiple sources. And so this is why at some point they think about using federated learning, because they think that their data alone is not going to be enough to solve their scientific questions, their scientific problem. And so yes, when using the platform, they define the scientific question. So really what's the objective of the machine learning problem. And once we've created models, they want to explore the models, and they want also to annotate the data. Then there are data engineers. On their side, they clean and they harmonize the data. And so it's something that is very important. So as mentioned by Mathieu, it's one of the challenges of federated learning. Then there are data scientists. On their side, when setting up the platform, I mean, before we start doing federated learning, they also know that it would be useful to use data from multiple sources. And once it's deployed, they want to train predictive models from multiple data sources. And finally, the last type of the last role corresponds to the support team. So on their side, they help to set up the platform, so to deploy it in the different centers. And when we run it, they support the data scientists and also the data engineers and the field experts in using the platform. So many different roles, so different types of actors who don't use the same language. So here we need a lot of coordination. So when doing federated learning, and especially in our case, where we are not like a kind of mobile phone application, where we know that the data are kind of already harmonized, here we need to put around the table many different types of actors, and we need to make them collaborate. And so now I'm going to explain the different steps towards the journey of building a machine learning model and the different requirements associated with it. So the first one is associated with IT admins and also the support team, is setting up the infrastructure. And so here I'm talking about the underlying infrastructure where we can deploy the federated learning platform. And so depending on the use case, we may want to deploy the platform either on-premise, so on the servers of a center, or in the cloud. So it depends on the security policy of the center. It also depends on where the data are stored for the different partners. We also need to make sure that we have enough compute and storage power. So in each centers, we're going to train a machine learning models. And remember, I told you that our use case at Hawkin is cross-silo federated learning. So not so many centers, but a lot of data in each center. So we need enough compute and storage resources. We also need to set up the network and everything related to security. And depending on the use case, as we deal with very sensitive data, it's something that is very important to do. And so in particular, we're going to discuss about the access management. So for the infrastructure, the application layer, and the data. So what are the ports we need to be open and the protocols to exchange data. So it's an important step, and it may take some time, but an interesting one, because we have kind of a heterogeneity of setup. The second step is to prepare the data. So once we've set up the infrastructure, we've deployed the application to the platform for federated learning, then we need to prepare the data. And here the actors which are involved are the data engineers, the data scientists, and also the field experts. So the three of them need to collaborate in order to be able to clean and harmonize the data. Because unfortunately, I don't know if you deal a lot with data in your daily life, but it's difficult to automate the data cleaning step. It really depends on the type of data that you use and the source of data. And so, yeah, it requires strong coordination between data owners and others, and in particular data scientists, who are going to to build algorithms based on this data. And so these steps, so how to do this data cleaning, it really depends on the data access management that I mentioned before. So more precisely, in some cases, we have no access, so the data scientist has no access to the data at all. So it's federated learning, so the data remains stored where they are collected, and it's not possible for a data scientist who is going to design a machine learning algorithm to see the data. So of course, it's not possible also to clean the data and to harmonize the data. And so here we really need to collaborate with the data engineers who work in the center and who is going to clean the data herself or himself. And for other cases where the sensitivity of data is a bit less important, we may have access, the data scientists may have access to the data. And so the collaboration between the data engineer and the data scientist to clean and harmonize the data is much easier when we have access to the data. Then the next step is to design and to debug the algorithm. So once the data is clean, now you can design and train your before training your algorithm, you need to design it and to debug it. And here also it depends on the privacy level of the data. And so depending on it, the data scientists may have access, so a remote access to the data, because we don't move the data, they always remain stored in the center. But it may be possible for the data scientist to get a remote access to the data so that she can build her algorithm and debug it on the real data. But sometimes it's not possible. And in this case, either we have access to a subset of the data, which has been de-identified beforehand, or in some cases, we don't have access to the data at all, even a subset. And then we need to have some public data in order to be able to design and to debug our algorithm. Okay, so those are the main steps when we set up and we prepare a federated learning project. And now I'm gonna detail the technologies that we've built to do federated learning. And so this technology is called OCIN Connect. So OCIN Connect makes it possible to train machine learning model on data which are distributed and which gonna remain distributed. So as you can see on this slide, so represented on this slide are four different centers. So here, pharma A, pharma, let's say center A, center B, and center C, and another center, which is a model server. So this one for our technology is exactly the same as others. We use the same technology in this one, but it's the one that is going to be used to aggregate the model. So if you remember the slide of Mathieu, that's the one that was in the center that is used to aggregate the different model updates. And the technology makes it possible then to train the model, and it can be deployed either on-prem or in the cloud. It can be deployed on both. So it's built around three key features. So the first one is that it's a versatile platform, meaning that it can work with any type of data. So it has not been tailored to be used on histology data. I mean, it could be used on meteorological data, for instance, or any type of data. It can also work with any Python machine learning library. So more precisely, a data scientist, when she registers an algorithm to the platform, she can use any Python machine learning library. She doesn't need to use either PyTorch or TensorFlow. And it's also very versatile because a data scientist can chain any training, aggregation, or evaluation task. So it's up to the data scientist to design those. So of course, we also provide predefined way to train a model, but it's also possible to define very atomic tasks so that you can either train a federated learning model with a precise federated learning strategy, or you can also just do one federated learning query. The second feature is privacy preserving. So as mentioned by Mathieu, it's something that is very important. I mean, we use federated learning for to ensure the privacy of the data. And also, as mentioned by Mathieu, keeping the data stored in the centers is not enough. We need to make sure that even the model that goes out of the center do not leak any property of the data. And so this is why in OCIN Connect, there are some privacy enhancing techniques that are implemented. And that's more precisely, the one mentioned by Mathieu before, are part of the stack. And finally, traceability is also a key feature of the platform. And more precisely, we trace all operations that occur on the platform. So that makes it possible to have reproducibility on the platform, and we believe that is very important, especially when we create machine learning model that can be used then for healthcare. So if you want to use it then for clinical, in some clinical setting, it's very important to be able to prove how the model was built and evaluated. And this traceability makes also possible for data admin to verify what their data are used for. And there is also a fine-grained permission that can be set on the different data sets. Okay, so there are different types of interfaces for the different types of users of the platform. So those who interact with the platform on a daily basis. So data scientists, so they use a Python library. And also a command line interface. So there are more kind of geeky people who want to interact with Connect only using Python. Then there are medical researchers. So here they have a medical graphical interface. And but this one is, is tailored only for histopathological data. So you may not be able to use it for physics, for application in physics. And then there is another graphical interface, which can be used for monitoring what's happening on the platform. And it's mainly used by admin people, by data admin, but it can also be used by data scientists or medical researchers. So a nice slide with many different, with a big diagram. So here, what I'm showing is the different interfaces and how they can be used to interact with the platform. So here I represented two different nodes. So one first node, let's say it's a hospital for a given use case, and another node, so it can be another medical center or a pharmaceutical company. So data scientists, and then the third machine that is represented is the local machine of the data scientist. So as mentioned before, for some use cases, we may have either open data set or a subset of the data that we can download and use locally to design our machine learning model. And for this, we can use the clinical interface, the command line interface, the graphical interface, or the Python library. But in some cases, we have remote access, and so it's possible for the data scientist to connect to the data of another node. So still using the same interface, but also for some cases, we don't have access at all to the data. And the data scientist does not have any access to the data. Okay, so let's now have a look at the technical stack that we've built at Okin for federated learning. So first, really the lowest level, so it's not something that we built, correspond to compute resources. So it's more one of the requirements. So it corresponds to the infrastructure. So we need some compute resources, and so it can be on the cloud or on-prem. Then our stack, which is called Okin Connect, is deployed on Kubernetes. So it corresponds to a container orchestrator. And so this is this layer. And then we have Okin Connect. So Okin Connect manages the networking, so the networking of the exchange of model updates. It also manages the assets and the permission. So when you register data in a node, everything is handled by the application layer. Then you did something to orchestrate computation between the different nodes. For instance, when a data scientist registers a set of training, aggregation, federated learning optimization, let's say, the application needs to automatically start task on the distributed data set. And this is what the computation orchestrator is used for. Then there are the data scientist interfaces, and also the one that's used by the medical experts. So the front end, the graphical interface, the Python library, and the command line interface. And on top of this, data scientists can register and train machine learning algorithms. And so at Okin, we have some preset algorithms and models which are designed for healthcare applications. And so something that is very important to mention here is that the core of Okin Connect, so the tech stack that we've built, is open source. So we created it. So it's a framework that is called Substrat. So it's a very versatile federated learning framework. And we built it at Okin, and we decided to open source it because we believe that it's very important to for such type of application to have something that is open source and because it can also benefit other industries. So we use it for healthcare, but it could be used for many other industries, such as in the energy or in finance or any other sector. And so we believe that by open sourcing it may be used in this other industry. And also because having something that is open source makes the code auditable. And we believe that it's very important in the context of federated learning, where we want to show that the data are used for what they are meant to be used and not for something else. And so if you are interested in having a look at it, you can check on GitHub. It's in the organization, which is called Substrat. And it's the core of OCIN Connect. And what is not open source for now is a graphical interface for medical experts and also the one for monitoring the platform and also the library for data scientists. For now, it has not been open source. Maybe in the future, but not for now. Okay. So given the remaining time, I'm going to skip the overview of the architecture and talk a bit more about real-world application of federated learning. So the first project where we use federated learning at scale and in production is a project which is called Melody. So Melody stands for I don't remember exactly, it's a too complex name, but basically what we do in this project is that we use federated learning for drug discovery. So the data that we deal with correspond to compounds, so chemical compounds, and we want to check whether they interact with some specific target. And so what we want to do in this project is to see whether using federated learning with data from 10 pharmaceutical companies, so drug discovery data from these 10 pharmaceutical companies, which you can see the logo here, lead to a machine learning model for drug discovery that has better performance than a model that would be built with data coming from one single pharma partner only. So when you want to develop a new drug, the first step is drug discovery. So this is when you check whether this compound reacts with some specific targets. And so it's something that takes time and that costs a lot of money. So on average, it's something like to bring a drug on the market is something like on average 1.9 billion euros and 13 years. So it's a lot. And so of course, if it would be possible to use data from all the pharmaceutical companies existing in the world, maybe we could accelerate this process. But these data are very sensitive. I mean, it's highly competitive data. It's, I mean, as mentioned, it costs a lot of money to do this step. And so pharma partners don't want to share the data, of course. And so it's why federated learning, but with a very strong privacy constraint, and especially making sure that we do not reveal any information on on what the pharma partners work on, might be interesting to kind of build a co-opetitive, as we call it, environment where the different pharma partners could find an interest in leveraging, in kind of sharing without sharing their data, but still protect the privacy of their data and do not lose their competitive edge over the other pharma companies. So it's a project that started 2 years ago. During the first year, we designed the platform, and so we adapted Connect for the use case of the project, because for this one, we needed to do a multi-partner multitask learning and with these strong privacy constraints. And it has been used during the first year on the real data of the pharma partners, and we could prove that the technology worked. And now we are in the second year of the project, and we use the platform we still use the platform on the real data. And what we want to show is that there is an interest of using federated learning. So here we are really looking at scientific results. And so we are doing the computation right now. So no results for now that can be communicated. But yeah, the objective of the second year is really to investigate whether there is a benefit or not of using federated learning. And then there is a last year of this project where we're gonna try to improve a bit more the performance of the model. And so in this case, we deploy the application layer on AWS. So of course, it's each pharma partner has its own AWS account, deploys its node on it, and we never have access, to the data. The data scientists who design the algorithm never have access to the data. So they have to work with open data sets in order to be able to design it. And another concrete application, it's a project that we do with hospitals in France, and more specifically, Centre Léon Bérard, Institut Curie, and CHU Nantes and APHP. And here we predict treatment response in breast cancer and also in melanoma. So it's a project which started 3 years ago. And so we were able to, we built Okin Connect during this project, and we deployed it. So it means that we deployed it behind the firewalls of the hospitals, and which is something that is not easy to do because you need to show that the application is secure, as for other applications, because we deal with sensitive data. And yeah, so we have interesting results, in particular for breast cancer, and we'll communicate those results very soon. And we have other federated learning project in the pipe, but I think I'm running out of time. So I'm going to stop here and keep time for question. So just to sum up this part, so we do really use federated learning at Okin, so in real life, in production. So it requires a lot of coordination between different partners, but we believe that is something that is very valuable and that it's kind of the future for machine learning if we want to be able to leverage data from multiple sources. Okay, so thank you for your attention.
So thank you for your very interesting presentations. So I would say the stage is open for questions. Some of you already used this F&A tool below, so you can type in your question. So let me start with the first question. From the audience. An important consideration in the healthcare space are the regulatory compliance. How can I convince a regulator to approve my model when I cannot assess the provenance of the training data data used to build the model? How does federated learning deal with this challenge? Maybe that's for you, Mathieu.
Yeah, maybe. So I think in federated learning, you can know if you assume that data you have access to has been produced in some center, you know from which center it comes. So and if you make a federated learning consortium from data coming from known centers, if you know, then you know the provenance of the training data in terms of geography at least.
So and also how you can convince the regulator is to have a system of where you can show the traceability of, kind of a model identity card. If you can trace the data on which you have been trained with a federated learning setting, it's possible to show to the regulator, I've trained my model on this and this and this data, and it's traced. So you can go and audit those centers. And so here, this is why traceability is important, in the context of healthcare.
So many thanks for the nice talk. So there's another interesting question asking, Yeah, for the training of the neural networks, you normally, in a supervised setting, of course, need annotated data. Well, you just moved one question away. You normally use annotated, or you need annotated data. Now, the question is how to deal with the annotation that occurred at each site separately, because scientists treating the data differently have other ideas about that. So Mathieu, coming back to your example, if you try to do a cell segmentation, yeah, and you give a similar image of a cell to different medical doctors, depending on the school they grew up in, they will come up with a different way of segmenting it. In my field of research, astronomy, people would come up with different kinds of classification of galaxies, for example. How do you deal with these differences in the way things had been annotated?
So maybe I start, and then Camille, you can take it as well. So as Camille presented, I think we require a lot of coordination between the different centers. It's really work between the data engineers who know the data, between the fields experts, as you mentioned, the scientists who need to agree on some kind of consensus. Maybe in some cases you need to re-annotate data so that it's going to fit and be consensual.
Okay. You want? Okay. Another question is something like in the direction of privacy concerns. Are there any guidelines for privacy preserving or information leakage? Or how do you choose the trade-off between privacy preserving and the exchanged information also in your models? How do you quantify it? Or are there some rules you have to be sure that your model or your technique fits?
So if you're using techniques such as secure aggregation during training, it's going to protect everything during training, and there is no really trade-off between privacy and performance, because it's not going to affect the very computations it's going to be done. It may affect the speed, however. Regarding the information in the final model, as I mentioned, the good framework to think the problem is differential privacy. It's really an ongoing debate in the scientific community of privacy as to really measure tightly the privacy. You can really define some kind of measurement of privacy. There is some kind of epsilon and data which quantify it. But you need some proof it's all boils down to finding the good proof, and it's unclear at the moment if we have reached the lower bound. So finding a good trade-off, it's difficult. You can it's difficult because with good if you really want to have a good privacy, you may really affect a lot of the performance. So it depends on the sensitivity of the centers you're working with. And I think it also depends, in order to measure it, you can not only rely on this kind of theoretical measures, but also you can really do attacks on the models in order to measure what it leaks empirically. And this also provides some kind of measure.
Yeah, many things. So the next question we have by Gianni Klesse is, how does your infrastructure in general deal with unstructured data? As a lot of stuff in medical things are handwritten text or notes in a computer, but it's not structured. There are no clear keywords when it comes to natural language processing. So it's really hard to deal with this kind of data in many senses. But how does your infrastructure deal with such an unstructured data set where you just not have training data X and label Y, and that's what you plug into?
So maybe I can start taking that question. So yeah, this is an extremely good point. And when we start collaborations with new academic centers or hospitals that provide us the data with, this is, we need to put effort in structuring the data, because unfortunately most hospitals, they don't have something like a data warehouse in place where all the data is provided in a structured way. So for those kind of cases, we work closely together with the departments, both with our scientists and with their local medical doctors, to collect the data and to structure the data and to prepare the data in such a way that we can work with the data. But yeah, it's indeed a very good question, and still not a solved problem yet.
Okay, maybe another somehow technical questions. What is the difference between somehow federated learning and using ensembles of models trained on the different nodes or hospitals?
Yes, this is a good question. So it depends on the way you view federated learning, but if you simply view it as a collaboration between centers, you can see as an ensemble as a one-shot federated learning, where you have one round of communication, everything is aggregated simply by producing an average of different models, and it does work. I think the interesting question is when is it better, when isn't it better? And I think as long as what all our experiments have shown is that if you're in a setting where you have enough, as the number of centers grows, the interest to do this kind of ensemble diminishes, because you're not gonna benefit a lot from a good collaboration.
Yeah, thanks. So another interesting question by Paul Walbot is, if you now actually train your model in a federated manner with different subsets at different places, and data is nothing that is frozen, that's more like a stream that constantly changes because new data sets get added over and over. I think in a lot of industrial applications or medical applications, this is the case. You don't have a fixed data set. How do you now ensure certain quality? So if things are changing, you took, for example, random subsets, but now the data as it was before changed. So a new random subset would be a different one. In principle, it goes back to the question, how well does your model at all generalize on the data it uses, of course. But if you now get cases in you haven't seen before, because you now treat other kind of cells or you have other biases in the way the imaging was done and you get different images, how do you control quality in such a setting?
So what you can use is something that is called a contribution score, is to be able to build a contribution score of the contribution of your data to build the model. And so there are some, so the way to compute it would be to compute the Shapley value, to be able to kind of estimate what has been bring by your data. And so you would be able to show that the data was of bad quality and that it did not help in training, in training the model. But the problem is that it's something that it's computationally speaking too heavy to do. Computing the Shapley value is something that would require to do a lot of computations, and that's something that is not possible. From an application perspective, it's not. So we need to have some estimation of this contribution score. And we have ways to kind of estimate it, but for now, it's more on a research aspect, and that it's not something that we are able to put in production. And so, yeah, so for now, we don't have any magical solution for this. You can also use simply monitor the performance of the model on a certain data set and see that this additional data, decreased the performance of the model. This is something that is simple to do, that you can also do it from a pragmatic point of view.
Yeah, that's right. But I think the question was more in the direction, how to deal with changes in data. So your database you use for training your model in a federated way now changed over time. And of course, if you have your scores, even if you use proper scoring rules, the basis you calculated on changed over time. And if you use techniques like subsampling or other ways of sharing your data at that point, the question is, how do you track control what's happening with respect to changes in the data? It's not talking about the individual contribution of data items to the model. It's more thinking about how in a general setting, what happens if data as such changed. You now sample and you get a completely different representation at a different location because over time you had this change in your data set.
So typically in the settings in which we work, we have a fixed data set and we train a machine learning model in a federated fashion. And then I think it's a very good question. What happens to this machine learning model? Is it stable over time if the distribution changes? But I don't think it's specific to federated learning. The question is, if you have a machine learning model, how do you control its performance over time?
No, absolutely. Absolutely. You are absolutely right with that. Yeah, it was just a question where someone asked, what makes it now different if you look at it in a way of a federated learning setting in contrast to like you would do it in a usual machine learning setting. But I think it's answered. Yeah, it's a challenge no matter whether it's federated or not. And there's no special difference, I think, between federated learning and on-site learning. Or
so the only hope is that because you've had access to a larger pool of data coming from different centers, it will be more resilient to these kind of changes.
Exactly. Yeah, it levels out in the end. Yeah, I see that.
Okay, maybe one question, maybe more related to the company Okin itself. One question was, is an engineering degree in contrast to maybe physics, informatics, computer science somehow enough to be probable considered in an application for a job, or what are the backgrounds, or what are you looking for?
So we are looking for many different types of talents. So it depends on the job, and yes, I mean, open for many different talents as long as you are enthusiastic and willing to work in a dynamic environment. I mean, we are happy to receive any application.
So another question from the Q&A section is, how do you deal with the selection of those variables, hyperparameters for your model? And here the question is, usually you need all the data and a validation set. So in a strictly speaking, usual machine learning setting. And how do you do it now to ensure that you generalize well, that you select the right hyperparameters or parameters of your model when you actually build something in a federated setting?
So I think it's for hyperparameter selection, it doesn't really change from standard machine learning. You need to define some kind of validation dataset. So, and the choice of the validation dataset is an interesting one. It depends on what you want to achieve. If you want to generalize on new datasets, and therefore you might be tempted to choose a validation dataset from another center, or you define validation dataset within each center. So at least you do some kind of intra-center generalization, and then you can tune your hyperparameters like this. And regarding in particular variable selection, I think that's where you can, if you have some contradictory information between the different centers, that's where you can benefit from field experts who might know what the good variables are and can help make some choice.
Yeah, many thanks. I would have had also a question. If you now have, because I think we are through the Q&A list by now, isn't it? Yeah. So I would have a question concerning if you want to put different kinds of data together. Say at one data center, you have observation of some cells with a specific tracer, and at another data center, you have different cells with a different tracer, but the annotation concerning diseases would be similar. What are your thoughts about now using this as a multidimensional input for such a training? So multidimensional in the way of saying those are all representations of the same outcome, but for different cells in a medical setting.
Camille, do you want to, or as you prefer?
You can start and I can.
Okay. So I think it depends. So what you, as far as I understand, what you're talking can be some kind of you have different tasks and maybe different kinds of data, but they are related in some way, and you want to benefit from the collaboration. So formulating federated learning as a multitask problem exists. It can, I mean, it's possible. For instance, if you're thinking of deep learning networks, what you can think is only sharing parts of the models. Like you're gonna have, if you view it simply as a sequential network, you're gonna keep specific top and bottom layers for each center, but then you're gonna share some intermediate parts.
And typically, this is what we do in the project with the pharmaceutical companies for drug discovery. So we do multitask learning, and so they kind of have different tasks in this setup, and also different compounds. And so what we do is that we have a model that is made of of some layers that are shared and that are trained in a federated learning setting, and the top layers that remain stored in the pharma premise, and that is very designed towards a specific task. So you can really tune the way you do your algorithm and what you exchange between the nodes.
Maybe one other somehow personal questions about OCIN and the future. What are the strategic plans of OCIN for the projects? This is up to now somehow your focus is on medical research somehow. Are there plans maybe industry cooperation where also somehow privacy is important, or is the focus on university more products in that direction, or more countries with these techniques, or how do you plan to scale up?
So I think I can start from a partnership perspective. So yeah, from my side, definitely what we're aiming for is to increase our network within Europe and also the United States, to have more and more centers connected to the federated learning platform, that we can really make use of all the data that is in the different centers and is lying there in an unstructured way, and to use it to create generalizable AI models that use data from different centers, to have AI models that are being developed that can improve model development in the field of pharmaceutical companies. This is the short-term goal, definitely. So focusing now on rest of Europe, and from a long-term perspective, and focus on different kind of industries. Camille and Mathieu, maybe you can say something, but I'm not aware that we are going to car industry yet.
No, for now we are really focusing on healthcare, and that's already, a challenge. And but we believe still that the technologies that we build, could benefit other industries and other sectors. It's the same principles that apply, but for OCIN, it's enough for us to try to build such a network of academic centers and be able to build great machine learning models that generalize well.
And there are plenty of pharma companies out there, so there's a lot of stuff to do. So
yes, I think the healthcare sector is the healthcare community is large enough to get enough projects.
If you talk about projects, another personal question on that point of view, of course, in pharmaceutics, there's a lot of money in. In astrophysics, where I am, there's nearly no money in. So how do you deal with those research projects from, let's say, scientific fields with less amount of resources?
So now we don't have any projects in the pipeline dealing with astrophysics. So sorry for that, Kai.
Could also be archaeology or any field where less money is involved than in pharmaceutics.
Yeah, so at the current stage, the models we are building together with academic partners, they are built in such a way that we at least know that there's traction from pharma industry, so that both the academic center and we benefit from the model development. So selling the model gets revenue share, blah, blah, et cetera, et cetera. So for now, we are basically focusing on those kind of model development where there's definitely a pharma traction. So I'm not really aware of any projects that are in our pipeline where we don't see like a commercialization in the near future. So yeah, sorry, Kai, but I can try to push internally for astrophysics.
Yeah, I think there are no more questions, aren't there? So with that, I would, I don't know, now something appeared in, yeah, I think now it's exactly like someone wrote in chat. I think it's now really time to thank all the presenters, and many thanks for the nice insights in Okin and federated learning as such. I think it was a nice overview to see what are, first of all, the challenges in federated learning and why we actually have to strive for it. And of course, seeing that there are a lot of obstacles when it comes to privacy issues, especially in the health sector, and how to deal with this. I found it quite interesting. And yeah, many things also for the technical overview, how to realize it in the end and how to deploy it on different compute centers, no matter whether it's on premises or somewhere in the cloud. That was really interesting to see. And yeah, perhaps we will see some research projects coming up in the future that are not only related to astronomy, but to some other things in analytics. So from my side of view, I would like to thank you for the nice insights in federated learning. Many thanks.
Yeah, I will also say thank you for the very interesting overview and insights.
Yep, thank you also very much for having us here and giving us the possibility to present what we do.
Thank you.
Thanks.
And if you have any other questions, I think the email addresses are being shared, right? Somehow. So if you have any other questions, don't hesitate to contact us directly.
Yeah. So enjoy the nice afternoon, I hope, and stay healthy, and perhaps see you in the future. Many thanks. Bye.
Have a good one. Bye-bye.